Let's look at the dispensational chart, and I want to remind us of the following. There is a current obsession, a current fascination with looking for the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy during the dispensation of grace. And so people look at the goings-on in the Middle East and view those events as somehow the fulfillment of something in the Old Testament, whether it's something in Ezekiel, Daniel, or otherwise. But they look at current events and they see those as the fulfillment of prophecy. Now, if you think about the chart just for a minute, if we look at the chart with the dispensation of grace and without the dispensation of grace, it is very evident that what the dispensation of grace does is it interrupts the prophetic timeline. It prevents prophecy from being fulfilled because it puts it on hold. Inasmuch as it puts it on hold, there is no prophecy fulfilled during the dispensation of grace. We've talked about that at length previously, so I won't mention that further now. But let's now go to the next subject, and that is this. Is the rapture imminent? People frequently speak of the rapture being imminent, and they've done this for a long time, and they say that it is because they say that there are no prophecies, there's nothing that has to be fulfilled before the rapture occurs, so the rapture can occur at any time. Now think about this. I'm going to tell you the rapture is not imminent. Look with me at 1 Timothy chapter 4 and 2 Timothy chapter 3. In other words, the word imminent means it can happen at any time. Look with me at 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Now when Paul wrote that in 1 Timothy 4, could the rapture have happened the next day? And the answer, if you think about it, is no. Because 1 Timothy 4, verse 1 is a prophecy. It's Paul saying that in the latter times, which is future, some certain things have to occur. Depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Now compare 1 Timothy 4 with 2 Timothy 3. 2 Timothy 3. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. So 1 Timothy 4 verse 1 talks about latter times. 2 Timothy 3 verse 1 talks about last days. Latter comes before last. Times is often used for years. Days is shorter than years. So latter times is getting near the end of the dispensation of grace. Last days is the very end of the dispensation of grace. So is the rapture imminent during all times of the dispensation of grace? And the answer has to be no, because you first have to have the latter times occur, and then you have to have the last days occur. So for example, if you are living during the latter times of the dispensation of grace, the rapture is not imminent because you still have to make it to the last days. So now go back with me to 1 Timothy 4, and here's what I want to touch on briefly. So how do you know whether you are in the latter times of the dispensation of grace? Well, verse 1 says this. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So during the latter times, people will depart from the faith. Verse 2, speaking lies in hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron. Now notice verse 3, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats, which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. So verse 1 talks about doctrines of devils, and verse 3 gives two examples of doctrines of devils. One of them is forbidding to marry, another is commanding to abstain from meats. Now, a traditional interpretation of that passage is to say, well, that's a reference to Roman Catholicism. And it's a reference to Roman Catholicism because priests are not allowed to marry, and there is a command to abstain from meats during Lent. And so That's one way that people view that. The problem with that is those commands have existed for a very, very, very long time. Are those unique to the latter times? They really aren't. They've been around for a long time. So I don't personally believe that that's what 1 Timothy 4 is talking about. So I'm going to show you what I think is likely that 1 Timothy 4 is talking about. I'm going to show some things on the screen here. I want you to look at this with me. This is from the World Economic Forum. And so this is not an invented conspiracy theory. This is not something that you can say is not real. This is on, if you notice this is on the wefforum.org website. It's their website. Now notice what it says. 5 reasons why eating insects could reduce climate change. And the idea is, of course, that greenhouse gases, climate change is destroying the earth. And so what should you do to prevent that? Well, you should eat bugs. If you were an enlightened person who really cared, you would stop eating meat and you would instead just use bugs as your protein. Now, maybe this is it, maybe it isn't, but doesn't that fit rather nicely with commanding to abstain from meats? Are some people going to use this and this becomes not just a suggestion, but a requirement? You should abstain from meats to save the earth. Now, you can decide for yourself, but let me tell you this. This earth isn't going to be destroyed until God destroys it, which he will in 2 Peter. And when God decides to destroy it, it won't be here no matter how much you recycle. And no matter what you try to do, you couldn't destroy this earth if you wanted to. God's going to destroy this earth in his timing, which is after we will all be gone. So I'm not saying definitively this is, but doesn't this feel like that could be the fulfillment of commanding to abstain from meats? That in the latter times, the worship of the earth comes to the point where what needs to happen is you are not allowed to eat animal products because we need to save the earth. Well, okay, so let's consider for the moment that is what commanding to abstain from meats refers to. What haven't we addressed? Forbidding to marry. So I'm going to go to a different website here, and it's the Babylon Bee. And so what is the Babylon Bee? The Babylon Bee is a satire site. In other words, it's not real. They have stuff on here that is made up. It's not real. Now, someone is going to see me referring to the Babylon Bee, and they're going to claim, well, David Reed thinks the Babylon Bee is real, and he's citing it as a source, and I'm sure this will be misconstrued because things are and such is life. But just to be clear for the record, the Babylon Bee is a satire site. It has false information. It is a humor site. It is not real, okay? So as clear as can be, it's not real. Nonetheless, the Babylon Bee was banned from Twitter for being fake news. Even though it is a satire site. That whole thing was absurd. But what I want to show you is this. Even though the Babylon Bee is a satire site, we live in times that are so absurd that they write articles that are fake and then they become fulfilled. In other words, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the time period we're living in is nuts. It's crazy. There's just ridiculous things going on. So this page we're looking at here is the book of prophecy. And so what it has is they call them prophecies, fake stories that they ran, and then months or years later, something happens in the real world that looks a lot like their story. So there's multiple pages here, but I'm just going to, for the sake of time, go to prophecy number 8. So if you see where it says, we said, they ran an article that was fake. It was fake. and it's titled Inclusivity Win, State of California to Make All Prisons Gender Neutral. And when they ran that in 2017, they were suggesting this is ridiculous. It is a dumb idea. It is an absurd idea, and I won't get into the details. You can probably figure them out. But is it a good idea to make all prisons gender neutral and to house different inmates together? There's reasons why you wouldn't want to do that, okay? They ran that in 2017. Then in 2020, the actual headline is California Governor Newsom signs law requiring transgender prison inmates to be housed based on gender identity. So that really happened. 2017, it's satire, it's fake, it's not real. 2020, what happens? Something that's very similar to that. Now, I'm not saying the Babylon Bee is prophetic. I'm not saying that. I'm mostly sharing this because it's curious. So what did the Babylon Bee run today, this very day? You ready? California becomes first state to ban heterosexual marriage. Now that's not, let's be clear, that is a fake article. This is intended to be humorous. This is not real. The reason I'm sharing it with you is what history has shown us recently is people write satire that is absurd. It is ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. But we are living in such a goofy time that allow a little time to pass, and what was satire is now actual headline. So, when 1 Timothy 4:3 says forbidding to marry, if you just take that in its most literal, normal sense, what does it prophesy? That at some point, the powers that be will forbid to marry. And so I thought it was just curious and really interesting that the Babylon Bee ran this as a fake article, as satire. And we of course, will see over time whether or not this article becomes true. Certainly, 1 Timothy 4:3 will be fulfilled in one form or another. It's going to happen.